And again, as we stated, we are honored to host this opportunity for the community to connect with our veterans on this very special day. We'll be going through some questions that have come up in our education program, and we would also like to be taking questions through chat. First, let's see who we have here today gathered. I'd like to go around the room, as I will say, and if some of you could introduce yourself, and please state your name, branch of service, and the years that you were in Vietnam. And you know what? I'll just, Ruby, let's start with you, and then we'll start moving around the room. Go ahead.
Okay, Ruby Schilling, First Lieutenant. I was an Army nurse, and I was at the 18th Surgical Hospital in the Central Highlands in Pleiku, and I served from February 67 to February 68.
Jose, how about you and Bob?
My name is Jose Ruiz. I'm a retired Master Sergeant. I was in Vietnam and with the 1st Infantry Division from December 67 to December 68.
I'm Bob Pfeiffer, Marine Corps. I was in Vietnam from 69 to 70. I was a radio telegraph operator up in I Corps with the 1st Marine Division.
Mick.
Hello, I'm Kim Michalowski. I was an Air Force K-9 handler at Phuket and Cam Ranh Bay from 1971 to 1972.
Yeah, Jim Brinks. I was in the Marine Corps from 1969 to 73. I was in Vietnam, 72, 73.
Mr. Mike Malloy.
Mike Malloy. I was in the United States Army. I was an infantry 1st lieutenant. I was in Vietnam from August 68 to August 69.
Howard.
Yes, Howard Hadley, Chief Master Sergeant, Air Force, retired. My term in Vietnam, 1968 through 72. I was a mechanic in 68 and then a flight engineer in 72.
Randy.
Hi, good morning. My name is Randy Ziemel, and I was in the United States Marine Corps from 1965 to 1969, and in Vietnam, 1966 to 1968, and the 1st Marine Air Wing.
And do we have a spokesperson from Memorial Hall? It looks like we've got quite the assembly of some Vietnam vets. Go ahead.
Don't look at
Dale Scholl. I'm a Marine. I was with the 26th Marines, 9th Marine Amphibious Brigade, Vietnam veteran, 1968 to 1969.
Okay, well, looks like we'll have a chance to centralize those questions to a good group there. So let's move to some of the questions here. We've got the student groups who are on board, and they're eager to hear the response of our Vietnam heroes. So for those of you who enlisted in the service during the Vietnam War, what were your reasons, and do you remember the day that you enlisted? And I'm just going to throw that out to the group. Go ahead if you would like to respond to that. Looks like Mick's got his hands up. Go ahead, Mick.
Well, I enlisted on April 30th, 1970. I went in because I had a pretty extensive family background at the military. My brother was at West Point, but also my draft number was really low, and I thought if I enlisted in the Air Force, I'd never get to Vietnam. That didn't work out so good. There you go.
Hey, Jose,
Yeah,
looks
Jim
like, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead there.
I'm Jim Brinks. I enlisted in April 20th, 1969. My draft number was number 2, so I was gone one way or the other. So I figured if I'm going to go, I might as well go with the best.
For the school groups, could you explain the draft number situation just very, very briefly so they can appreciate your reference? Because I saw a bunch of the Vietnam veterans chuckling when you said that here a few seconds ago.
Well, they went by, they just pulled your birthdays out of like a jug or something, and first, second, third, however you went. My birthday came up number 2.
And being number 1 or number 2 meant you were on the short list to go someplace. So
I was gone no matter what.
yeah.
Yeah, mine was 7. So
Jose.
Well, I came out of school and I went to Lincoln High School on the east side, and they basically just gave me a a diploma because I didn't know how to speak English very well. So after I got out, I didn't know what to do. And somehow, and I don't remember this, I ended up at the recruiting station and I joined the Army. And I know the drill sergeant helped me out with my exam because I had to take an exam. All I can remember is I matched shapes and he took my paper and says, "You passed." You know, this is September 1966. Guess what? Next year I was in Vietnam. I was an infantryman. So I loved it. I loved the Army.
Go ahead, Howard. Looks like you have your hands up there too.
I got in the service. I enlisted in 1963. It ended up 26 years later, but I was flying around the United States the time of the Vietnam War, kicked into full gear. So I flew over there a lot after I was in the service a while.
I think clarification there on something that Jose said earlier, and I think this is important for the student groups to understand. You emigrated to the United States from Mexico when you were only 16, and you go into the Army only a few years later. And so the English barrier of the English language was pretty prominent in your life. And I think that's such a commendable thing of you. I just wanted to point out the language barrier and what you did, so they understand a little bit of what you were describing. I thought that's important to point out, Jose. And I just learned that this morning when we were talking earlier. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. You know, here's the classic question. How did you tell your family that you enlisted, or your decision to enlist, and how did they react? Would anybody like to comment on that? Go ahead, Randy. And then I'll go to the memorial.
In April 1st of 1965, I didn't really know the importance of getting a good education. So students out there, get a great education. But anyways, I got my education in the United States Marine Corps, signed up in Chicago, and came home and told my mom, and she was crushed. She expected me to be going to college and doing all those things, and ended up in the Marine Corps and going to Vietnam. So it was not a pretty sight when I came home and said I wanted to enlist. When I enlisted, she wanted to call my Marine Corps person and get me out of it, but well, didn't happen.
Contract was signed. So I saw Dan in Memorial Hall had his hands up, and then I'll go up to Ruby.
Oh, my story is completely different. I had graduated from nursing school and I went to the recruiter and said that I would like to go to Vietnam. And he said, sign here. And so immediately I was on board to go. And my mother was so angry that I did that. She said, well, you can't do that. Well, I was 21, so I could, and I did. But I just wanted to serve my country and use my nursing skills.
Where did you graduate from with your RN, with your nursing?
Rockford, Illinois.
Okay. Okay, interesting. To Memorial Hall, I see Dan's got his hand up. Go ahead, Dan.
My name is Dan Furtick, and I was in the 501st MP Company, 25th Infantry Division in Vietnam. I was stationed in Cu Chi, which was called Tunnel City. It's a tourist attraction now in Vietnam. I have no desire to go back and see it. But when I was 18, I went to Oshkosh University, and I had a 0.92 average. Well, back in 1968, when you're a college student and you have a 0.92 average, you are good draft material. I was drafted into the Army. I didn't want to go. I told my buddies, I says, I was scared. I says, well, why don't you join with me? And they says, no, we're going to party over the summer and we'll join in fall. Well, the next month they got their draft notice. So 3 of us went in together. And I can tell you this, I wasn't a good soldier. I regret that, but none of us wanted to go to Vietnam. And after the 366th day, I threw a party because Vietnam was a year's tour and I didn't have to go to Vietnam. Well, the next day after the party, I felt bad because I thought some poor slob has got to take my my position. So I didn't want to live the rest of my life a coward. I volunteered for Vietnam. Well, when I went into the company commander, he called me in. He says, "Are you nuts?" And I made an excuse. I said, "I'll get a increase in rank and more pay." So naturally, they needed bodies over there. And, I 1049'd over there. Well, I was already in Vietnam when my parents found out that I volunteered, and they were super mad. Luckily, I came back without any injuries. And right now, it's one of the, outside of raising my children, it's one of the proudest things I ever did.
Excuse me, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads here. One of the questions really dovetails nicely into Dan, what you talked about. It was on the draft side. So for those on the panel today who were drafted, how did you find out your number had been called? And we've touched on that, a couple of folks. Anybody who'd been drafted? Mike, I see you got your hands up. Could you expound on that a little bit?
All right. I went to MATC, junior college, got my associate degree in June. I did my paperwork to start at UWM in the fall to continue towards a 4-year degree, but over the summer, I was not a student at either of those schools, so I did not have a student deferment. My number had previously come up while I was at MATC, so when my student deferment ended when I graduated from MATC, and I got a letter to come on down, and they put me in the Army.
Go ahead, Bob.
I got drafted 2 months after I was in Vietnam. My father sent me a letter saying I got a draft board notification, and he gave him my FPO address. Fleet Pacific Operations.
Yes. So you already had a downrange address. That's funny. I see a hand up in Memorial Hall. Go ahead.
Dan, this is George Baldus. I was a United States Army drafted into the infantry and drafted in 1969 March, went to Vietnam in September. And coincidentally, the day I got there, Ho Chi Minh died. So I was spreading the nasty rumor that, well, they heard we were coming and now we can all go home. However, it didn't turn out that way, but most of us made it back anyway. So that was somewhat of a setback for me, but I made it.
Memorial Hall, I see another hand. Go ahead. It looks like it may be muted somehow. It might have been bumped. If Kristen's in the room, we could technical assistance, please. There we go.
Okay. Hear me there?
Oh, it sounds good.
Gary Schlenbolt. There was 3 of us that were out one night, and we were talking about the 4 different buddies that we lost in Vietnam in 68 and 69. So we all decided to go into the Army on the buddy system. All of our draft numbers were in the 300, so we wouldn't have been drafted. After basic and AIT, I went to Germany, and from there, I 1049 to Vietnam. The 1049 is a form that you fill out in order to volunteer. They rejected it the first time, and I signed up again, and then I was able to go. And I spent 1971 in Vietnam. And it was, like Dan said too, I agree, it was one of the best years of my life. I have no regrets at all. Thank you.
So as we're transitioning on some of the questions, we're starting to shift a little bit more about while you're in country. And here's a question, again, I'm opening it up to the group, please. And I think the question would be, did you know anyone else that went to Vietnam? So somebody maybe you knew, high school or a stateside college that went over with you, and just kind of talk about that a little bit on going over with someone that you knew. Anybody like to comment on that? Okay, go ahead, Bob. I saw your hand up.
Wrong Bob, but it was a Marine, so it doesn't matter.
Fellow Marine.
Yeah, it's Jim again. Yeah, I had a friend that used to work at the garage. we'd be really big in drag racing when we were young. And he got drafted in the Army, went over to Vietnam, and he never came home. He was killed in action when they went across the border into Cambodia.
You had worked with him? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, well, that and raced with him. So yeah, I knew him real well.
Yeah. Bob, you also had, Bob Pfeiffer, you also had your hand up. Go ahead. You're on mute. You're on mute, Bob. I see his handlebar mustache bouncing around, but I'm not hearing the words. You guys are on mute, Bob. Nobody can hear you. That's sound language where I can't hear you. And anybody knows how to sign, that's not sign language. I see a hand up in Memorial Hall, and then we'll try to fix the microphone in on Jose's computer. Go ahead, Memorial Hall.
Like I said before, there were 3 of us that went in at the same time.
Yeah.
And the Army was the best thing for all 3 of us because I would have to classify us then as punks. And I was a kind of a smarty, and they ask you what you want to be. And if you qualify for a position, they give it to you. And I said, I want to be a cop. I never thought they'd make me a military policeman, but they did. My other buddy said, I want to be a secretary. Well, they made him a clerk typist. My other buddy, he says, I want infantry. They never thought they'd put him in the infantry. Well, they love that. They put him in the infantry. He went to Vietnam, and when you're there for 6 months, you get an R&R. Well, he liked the R&R so much, he stayed another 4 months. Well, in those days, they came and got you, and you had to make the time up. Today, you have to be smarter than the average person to get in the military. And if you don't perform, they just give you a discharge and say, thank you for your service. So today, the military, if you want to go into the military, you have to be smarter, you have to be trained, and you have to advance.
There's a phrase you'll often hear is up or out, meaning you have to perform or out. I see another hand in Memorial Hall. Go ahead, please, George.
Yeah, this is George Baldus. I did not go into the service or to Vietnam with anyone in particular that I knew. But once I was there about 10 months, I did meet a guy that I went to high school with, a guy named John Phelan. A very coincidental meeting. We happened to both go to the same guy to get our hair cut. And I looked at him and told him, hey, you're John Phelan. You went to Mesmer High School and you graduated in '67. He said, who the hell are you? Well, that was a brief visit, brief conversation. 50 years later at Germantown, when they had the traveling wall out there, guess who I meet in the American Legion post in Germantown? John Phelan. And I looked at him and I said, you're John Phelan. You went to Mesmer High School. You graduated in 1967. And what does he say? Who the hell are you? So I told him, we've had this conversation once before, and he's in pretty rough shape now. I want to say hello to him. John, we love you, brother.
So one of the questions that comes up, and it looks like we've got Jose and Howard, your mics are, we unmuted them for you. We were having some issues there. Sorry about that. So you guys are ready to go if you're ready. The first day in Vietnam, do you remember? And it'd be a surprise if anybody on this call doesn't remember day one. And I guess what was most memorable on it? So if you could, who'd like to, I see a hand up and looks like Bulldog Dale in Memorial Hall. Go ahead, lead us off on that one.
Me?
Dale, he's muted.
The route that I took to Vietnam, we left from El Toro Air Base in California. We flew to Hawaii, spent a couple hours in Hawaii changing planes. From Hawaii, we flew to Tokyo, and spent a couple hours in Tokyo changing planes again. And from Tokyo, we flew into Da Nang. We landed in Da Nang late at night. We were ushered into some barracks at the Da Nang airport. And by now it's close to 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of us have been up for almost 30 to 33 hours straight from the time we left El Toro or that morning until the time we arrived in Vietnam. They put us in barracks, and we were not in the barracks more than an hour and a half when the airport got raided with mortars and rockets. So they sounded the alarm. They ushered us out again and told us to go into the bunkers. What bunkers? We had no idea where the bunkers were, but there was live mortars and rockets going off within 3 or 4 hours of my landing into Vietnam. The other thing I remember is how moist the air was, humid, I should say, and how hot the temperature was. And that was my introduction to South Vietnam.
You remember the day? What was the day, Bulldog? You might have said it, but I didn't hear you. You're on mute when you started.
Say again, I didn't hear that, Dan.
The date.
Oh, the date, that was in 1968.
Thank you.
I was in
Mike?
Vietnam 1968 and 1969 with the United States Marine Corps.
I'm going to go in order, Mike, and then Randy, and then Howard, and then back to Mick. Those are the order of hands. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I ended up getting into Vietnam in August of 1968. It was hot, it was humid. They put us in some temporary facilities at what was called the 90th Replacement Company. And that night we got mortar rounds. And they came around and they said, oh, don't worry about it. They're not really trying to hit your area. They're trying to hit the petroleum storage facility next to you.
Which is flammable.
Yeah. And they, in the morning, they said, check the boards because some of you had your orders changed. We all came in country with orders. I had orders to the 4th Special Operations Group. When I looked at the board, it was changed. And they said that all of the infantry lieutenants who came in that night had their orders changed. Half of us would go to the 1st Infantry Division. Half of us would go to the 1st Cavalry Division because they had more openings that week. And I ended up in the 1st Cavalry Division. And it was a good unit to be in. I had a good year with the 1st Cavalry Division.
Randy, you're up next, please.
Yep. I remember it was very, very strange, of course, getting off the airplane in Da Nang, and it was very hot. It was very fishy smelling, and a very, very strange smell. And everybody was in one heck of a hurry. And we landed, got off the aircraft very, very fast. And they were waiting for troops to get back on the airplane. They didn't even shut off the engines. They got on. They took off at about a 45-degree angle. And that all took about 15 minutes to offload, load up, get out of town. And I remember, because we were trained to always salute an officer. And I know guys saluted officers when they got off the airplane that were standing around. And that was the last thing that the officers wanted to have accomplished. Saluting an officer was a bad thing in Vietnam as the enemy was there watching and they were going to take out an officer. So that was the last thing you wanted to do was salute an officer. But a lot of hurry, a lot of smells.
Howard.
Yes, I landed at Da Nang in August of '68. And I stayed in the tent for about a week before I moved into the barracks. And the first question I asked when I was in the tent, I said, do they have room service around here? Being in the Air Force for a few years, I got acclimatized to decent rooms and room service menus. Well, they said the only room service you're going to find is sweeping out the barracks to start. So that was a nice welcome to Vietnam.
And they probably give you the golf course book, right? So you know where the golf course is at too.
Yeah, they showed me how many different brooms you could use for clubs.
We'll go to Mick and then up to Jose. Mick, go ahead.
Well, I remember it was late May of 1971. We flew in, I believe it was Cameron Bay. We went from Fort Lewis to Alaska to Tokyo to Cameron Bay, and then they, as you got off the plane, they identified where you were going in country. And my first duty station was Phuket up near Queen Yan. So they had another plane waiting for us, a C-130. So we climbed on that, flew up to Phuket. As we come in, I remember very distinctly, the pilot comes over the radio and says, "We're going to have some turbulence coming in. Don't worry about it." He says, "Just incoming ground fire we're avoiding." So the plane starts going like this. And now we're in a C-130. Half of the guys are getting sick. He lands, we get off the plane, and there's four or five bullet holes in the tail, another half a dozen in the fuselage and stuff. And the guys, as we land, the crew chief says, "That was nothing. Don't worry about it." And then we got processed in, sent to a temporary holding area. And again, just like somebody, mentioned earlier, we got mortared that night. And I'll never forget the first mortar time. The first time I came under fire like that, it was like, holy shit, I think I'm someplace weird. Pardon my language. This isn't Kansas anymore.
You'll just have to put a quarter in that swear jar. Jose.
Yes.
Well, I don't know how many of my fellow veterans here had the chance or the misfortune of being there during the whole Tet Offensive. I got there on December 1967, and all the activity just started brewing. Around January the 31st of 1968, I mean, all the areas throughout Vietnam got engaged by the enemy, whether they were North Vietnamese or Viet Cong. Everybody got engaged, and everybody came under attack, mortars, rockets. It was just a chaotic, scary moment. And when they took us out to the field, they put us in a chopper. When we got to our home base, they took us out. They put us out on the field, and I was in the field the whole year, with the exception of a few times that I came in and for cleaning up and all that kind of stuff. Then went back right out again. I would like to point out to these young students that when you see all these veterans, all of us went there when we were young, and we grew up, and we lost our youth within the first couple of weeks when we were in country, because most of us, all of us, came under attack, and we were scared. I was, and I'm glad I made it back, and I'm glad I'm hanging around with veterans of this caliber, and I'm very proud of that.
Jose, you give a nice, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Sorry about that. You give a nice perspective for these students. And I'd like to throw this question out, which has come up in a couple different, how did you stay in touch with back home? Because obviously you're in a very foreign land, it's hostile. And of course that connection back home was your lifeline to what was sanity, I guess you could say. I'm asking this question to everybody on the group. Did you stay in contact? Did you have loved ones back home? I'm assuming most of you did. And then what was that like? Because today is an instant message, text, phone call, mobile phone world. And so if you could give a great perspective for these, I'm seeing a lot of hands. I can see a lot of, here we go. Here are the stories. What was it like, and how'd you stay in touch? Mick, I saw your hand up there right away. We'll start with you and jump over to Mike.
Well, for the most part, writing letters, hoping to get a package or a letter from home and stuff. It was always great to get mail, because that's the only way you really were able to communicate. I do remember one time I was able to get on something, and somebody correct me if this is wrong. I think it was called a Watts line. And you had to say over when you were done talking and stuff. And I had 3 minutes to call home. So I called home, my mom answered the phone. And I said, "Mom, this is Kim. When you're done talking, say over, over." She started crying. My dad got on the phone and said, "Who is this? What's the matter?" I said, Dad, it's Kim. When you're done talking, say over. Well, my dad was in the Army in World War II. He picked up on it right away. My mom, I never talked to my mom, but she cried for 3 minutes. I talked to my dad for 2.5 minutes. And we had a nice little conversation, said I was okay. Everything was good. And I'd see him and hopefully see him in 7 months. And all I heard from my mom and the whole time was she was crying. Other than that, that's the only contact I had with my family, other than getting letters and getting packages.
Modern day, I think we call it the DSN line, but I think it's just probably, it's the same thing, just a different system. Mike, I saw your hand up, and then we'll jump up to, I think that was Jose.
My primary communication with friends and mostly letters to friends and relatives. I did manage while I was there to get a small battery operated tape recorder. So I did record cassette tapes and send them home. And then they would record tapes and send them back to me. I can only recall one actual phone call while I was there. And that was a radio relay phone call, similar to what Mick just described. The problem I had with these cassette tapes is that I could hardly understand them, and my folks could not understand them because I recorded them on a little battery operated tape recorder. They recorded them, listened to them, and recorded them on an actual tape recorder. The speeds were different. Battery speed was not the same as a regular plugged in tape recorder, so it was hard to understand the tapes. But that was my method: letters, tapes, and one phone call.
So you could hear the voices.
Yes.
Yeah. Howard.
Yes, I got a few letters, but very infrequent, maybe one a week. And I tried the Watts line over, and that worked pretty good, but a lot of interruptions over. So my folks used to send boxes of cookies, and they disappeared before I could get the last one. But that's how we stayed in touch. And then when I started flying back and forth, it was much easier because I could call from the United States using real telephones.
Jose.
Oh, I wish I would have had telephones. We were in the field. Every day was doing something else, and if it wasn't raining, it was dry and hot. The fact of the matter, and I feel bad about this, is that I never called home because I never had a chance to. I never wrote to my house because of laziness. I just love the military life. But no, maybe about June or July of 1968, my mother called the Red Cross, and the Red Cross tracked me down in Vietnam, and the commander of my battalion came over by chopper to the field, and he made me write a letter, and he locked my heels, made me write a letter. And so I could send it to my mom. And then he said, if I ever get anything like this, you will be in stockade. So he threatened to some punishment for me, and that did it. So I wrote to my mom after that. But some of us are not as devoted to certain things. I've always been a loner, and that's why I am where I am. I do things by myself. I have a great family, big family, but I'm a loner, and my mom resented that.
There's one letter that nobody ever liked getting over there, but a lot of them did receive. And it was a Dear John letter. And I was always surprised because so many times these girls, and that's what they were because we were boys, these girls would blame the veteran over in a combat zone because all of her girlfriends had their boyfriends there and hers was gone. I just, we'd have to become psychologists for each other, there's a lot of guys just shrugged it off, and a lot of guys, it was their whole life, an 18, 19-year-old kid, and his girlfriend of a couple of years is telling him she's going to start going out with other guys because she can't have access to him. I always thought that was amazing that they were blaming it on the combat veteran for not being with her.
Well, I know we're talking to a school group, and I'll call you Ruby right after this quick remark. But I think they all think boys and girls are yucky at this age. But could you, and Ruby, maybe you can explain what a Dear John letter is, so the student groups understand the reference point.
Oh, that's just a letter that says that they're really sorry, but they're checking out and So it's on to the next. But I had an interesting situation. I had a husband to be in country. And so I had access to a phone and I could call him, and I had to go through 8 different operators to get there. And then we would over each time to these different operators. And then they all listened to my call. And then when I would say goodnight to him, they'd say, good night, Ruby, good night, Ruby, good night, Ruby. So these 8 operators then responded to me. But again, I had one opportunity to call my mom, and like Mick, my mom just cried the whole time. She never did get the over thing. That just wasn't something that she understood. And one time I did get a package with carrots from my cousin. And by the time they got to Vietnam, no one wanted to share those with me because they were all shriveled, but I ate them. You know, they were carrots from home. So
A carrot package instead of a care package, right?
right.
Play on terms. Believe it or not, we have just under 10 minutes because we're going to go to 9:45. So we're not going to get anywhere near to all the questions. So I'm going to look at some of the questions that we've got here. Some of them was about sleep and rest. So could you kind of explain, and we'll go around robin again, talk about downtime and with that, how that impacts how you're trying to decompress with stress, if you could do that. I see Mick, you got your hand up. Why don't you start us off with that one? Kind of what you did for downtime.
I will say the thing I did for downtime was 2 things. I slept and I took care of my dog. We worked from most of the time we worked from dusk till dawn, doing perimeter security with the sentry dogs. We get off in the morning. We would take the dog back to the kennels, get them settled down, go have something to eat, maybe go sleep for 4 or 5 hours, and then it was back to the kennel to get the dog ready for the night shift. Because I basically had 5 nights off the whole time I was there for a hooch leave. I was forced to take a hooch leave because I didn't go to R&R, and so I basically took leave in country, and so the other 360 or almost 300 days I was there, because I came home a month early. It was just taking care of my dog, going back up to the kennel, making sure he was fed, grooming him, getting him some exercise other than walking in the sand in the jungle at Cameron Bay and Phuket, and that was about that. That was my downtime, but that was the best thing for me, having something to take care of and something to do. I think that was the best for me. So,
Randy, I saw your hand. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sleep was an absolute luxury, and you got it when you could, but you were at work doing what your job was 24/7, and I think that transition to what we do now, we could function even at the older age with little to no sleep. As far as the stress, I don't know, maybe you got used to it. It certainly paid the price later on with PTSD and those other things, but you just were so busy 24/7 doing your job that you hardly even thought about the stress that you were really under and the price you paid for it.
Sorry, Howard, please.
Yes, we had 12-hour shifts in the engine department at Da Nang. So we'd go home and we'd get some sleep between rocket attacks. And I went on an R&R, rest and recreation, over to Thailand to Patio Beach. And that de-stressed, but I really wasn't in a position other than a few rocket attacks that I even was stressed out. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't see any other hands up for that. So, oh, go ahead, Jose, please.
No, I just want to know that I want you to know that there are a lot of those things that happened to us as a young group of men that went from here to Vietnam, is that it really didn't matter whether then maybe you had one incident in 1 year or one incident in 2 years or one incident every week or every day, every other day. The fact of the matter, with that one particular incident that happened to you, if you got engaged into a firefight, heavy mortars or heavy rockets, it's just enough to scar you and leave that mind, shaky. I was in the field the whole time. Maybe 3 or 4 times I came back into base camp. And if it wasn't fire missions, supporting this, supporting that, I was a mortarman. I was an infantryman. I was a mortarman with an 81 millimeter mortar and a 4-point deuce mortar. And it was a lot of activity. Everybody had their hands on this, and everybody suffered a little bit, unless you're Superman. But I think most of us suffer a little bit and got stressed out about families and all that. But it was hard to do.
We've got just a few minutes left. Looks like about 3 minutes on the clock. And I just want to open this up to everybody on the panel here today. One of the questions that was offered was, what is the best way people can show appreciation for your service? And this younger group, I don't know if they understand how poorly the Vietnam vets were treated when you all came home. You were really almost blamed for the war in Vietnam, and that wasn't the soldier's fault or the Marine's fault or the sailor or the airman. I'd like to bring it up to the group and say, please let this group know what is some of the best way that they can show appreciation, not only for your service as Vietnam veterans, but for all men and women who serve. Go ahead and please, if you could just give some advice to the group. Go ahead, Bob. I see your hand. Go ahead, please. And then
Real simple. If you're out and about and you see a woman or a man with a veteran's cap on or a uniform, even if you don't want to walk up to them because you think you might bother them, you just get a little eye contact and give them a head nod. That makes a world of difference. That guy or that woman might have been having a terrible day, and that little nod of acceptance that you acknowledge that they're a veteran might turn their whole day around. It's a beautiful thing.
Howard, I saw your hand, then we'll go to Memorial Hall. I see George. We'll follow Howard. Go ahead, Howard.
Yes, I'd say if you see a veteran, again, eye contact, but don't ignore them. Don't walk past them without at least saying, hello, hope you're having a good day, or even buy them a cup of coffee. Just acknowledge and say, welcome home, brother. That's what I would do.
Go ahead, George.
I get the most value out of younger people saying thank you for your service. The older guys like myself, a lot of us been through all of it. And yeah, that means a lot from each other. But from the younger people that in today's society, that's all me. And to have them knowing and be concerned enough to know the history of what we did, it's very comforting to have them say thank you.
Very well said. And we're up against the clock on this one. I just want to have enough time before the school bell beeps and they all have to go back to their next class. Thank you, every single one, for joining us today to talk and present. I just asked the younger students to please mark today as a date that you will always remember and recognize going forward. This is Vietnam War Veteran Day, and it's a very special day to remember all those men and women who served our country honorably and with respect. So I just thank you so much, everybody who participated. What a wonderful conversation, discussion. And, I look forward to the ceremony that's going to happen today at 10:30. And by the way, just so everybody understands, while I've been sitting here, my phone's been blowing up. We've got news media that's checking in. They're going to be there at 10:30. So just a wonderful day, a wonderful experience. So thank you so very much. We're up against the clock on the end of it. So round of applause, please. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So well, very well done. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. Thank you.